Welcome, everyone. This is Denise Demese. I'm with the Office of Faculty Development with the University System of Georgia. And we are so pleased to have Lauren Barbeau and Claudia Cornejo Happel with us today to talk about documenting effective teaching behaviors. This has been a very popular topic, and we are so glad you all are here. As Lauren said, please click on that link in the chat. I'll keep putting it up there as we go forward, as new people come in, but click on that link in the chat now and enter that code so that you can follow along with the presentation. And I'll just go ahead and turn it over to Lauren and Claudia.
Okay, so let me check Nearpod. It looks like we've got 81 of you, so I'm going to keep urging you to click that link if you haven't gotten in already. As I mentioned, this is going to be a very boring presentation for you if you don't click the link, because all you're going to see is our talking heads, which I'm guessing you probably don't want to see. So at this point, I'm going to ask Claudia that you go ahead and stop sharing that screen, and we're going to move forward. So hopefully you've had a moment to fill out that survey that you see in Nearpod as the first thing. If you haven't, that's okay. We have enough responses to sort of give us an idea of where to go with this presentation. So I want to start off by saying thank you for being here for documenting effective teaching behaviors. I have a feeling that if you're here, you have some very concrete reasons why you're here and what you need to get out of this. We have a question: will the presentation slides be made available to you later? Yes, we will be providing Denise with an asynchronous link to this presentation that will have all these slides as well as the activities you can participate in later if you want to return to this. So a little bit about us before we get started. So as Denise mentioned, I'm Lauren Barbeau. I am currently at University of Georgia. I've been here since January. I came from Georgia Southern University, so it's really nice to see some of my Georgia Southern colleagues here. Claudia and I actually met when we were both at Georgia Southern University. Yeah, we miss you too, Nikki. We do miss you guys. And we started working on this critical teaching behaviors project, which you're going to hear more about throughout the course of this presentation, because that's really the heart and soul of what this presentation is based around. So I'll give Claudia a moment to introduce herself as well.
Yeah, thanks. And so as Lauren said, we did meet at Georgia Southern, and I'm excited to see some Georgia Southern folks too, as well as colleagues from other University System of Georgia schools. So yay. Currently, I am actually down in Florida at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University and have been trying to get people excited about the critical teaching behavior framework there, and it's been working. So far we have had some experience with the framework at different institutions and have heard from some colleagues who've used it. So we're getting a lot of positive feedback on it, and we are very excited to share it with you today. The critical teaching behaviors project has several elements to it, and Lauren will talk just a little bit about some of those later, but today we are focusing really on the aspect of documenting teaching and effective strategies for doing so. And so for today, we have a plan for you, obviously, and we will introduce a process that we think is effective in really going about documenting effective teaching. And that starts, as you can see now on your Nearpod screen. It starts with articulating your core teaching value. That's really the center component of documenting effective teaching behaviors and creating a narrative around it. Then thinking about some of the things that you are doing in your teaching that align with what is important to you in your teaching. Thinking about teaching behaviors that demonstrate those actions, those values in action. And the critical teaching behaviors framework really provides a tool to help you start thinking about both your values and big categories of behaviors that are important to you, as well as some of the more specific ones that you can think about that you are doing every day in your classroom. Then we'll talk about selecting evidence of these behaviors. And in the short survey that we did at the beginning, several of you mentioned that, many of you, actually, I think over half of you mentioned that you're using student feedback, either end of term student feedback or midterm student feedback as one of the tools. And I think that's a great tool, but there are so many other things that you can use as evidence. And so we'll talk about different ideas for evidence to document and capture teaching behaviors and values. And then we'll wrap it all up by thinking about, okay, how can we pull it all together? Documenting teaching, effectively documenting teaching behaviors. It's not just about having all the pieces, but really creating a narrative around it and selling, that sounds a little bit weird, but really selling all the things that you're bringing to the table and showcasing the amazing things that you are doing in the classroom, and not just the things that are easily visible, but also all the things that go on in the background as you're planning, teaching, and preparing for it. And so to start with that, we want you to start thinking about what is your core teaching value. And in the Neopod, there is an activity that's going to come up right now. So it is almost like a discussion board where you can add your thoughts to it. And we ask you to think about what are your core teaching values and to summarize those in one sentence or maybe a few bullet points, and share with us and the other participants, what are the things that drive you teaching? What are the things that are essential for a good instructor? What must they do to teach successfully and effectively? And so I'm seeing it's already popping up there, wonderful contributions. As you are posting them and as you're reading through them, also make note of your response and maybe some of the responses from your colleagues that you think are especially meaningful and interesting, because we are going to come back to this later. So I'll give you a minute and stop talking to finish that.
And I'll point out that if you've put yours in and you want to, I see some of you are already starting to upvote or use a little heart to show you agree with something. This is a great opportunity to see what other people are saying and say, oh, I like their phrasing way better than mine. So this serves the dual purpose of letting you poach a little bit from other people's good ideas. But as Claudia mentioned, we are going to come back to this, your core value. We're going to keep working with this throughout the session. So please do make sure that you make a note of it. Oh, joy in learning and joy in your work. Oh, I like you joy people. I appreciate whoever said reevaluation of my values. That, you know, we've done versions of this workshop a couple times. I've never had someone say something like that, but I love that.
I also think it's exciting that there's a lot about creating community, making sure that you're inclusive, engaging students, right? Students are an important part of the learning experience. So thinking about them, it's something that comes out clearly in many of your responses, that they are at the center for you.
Oh, take care of myself so I can support others. I think this last pandemic year has taught us a lot about that one. Seeing a lot about inspiring others, creating communities. Good, some professional development to demonstrate competence and compassion. I think empathy has been a big lesson of the past year, for sure. Okay, so it looks like the responses are sort of falling off. So if you're still quickly typing yours in, I ask you to wrap it up, or just write something down that you can remember. So it's okay if you didn't get it on the board. This is really to help you brainstorm and get ideas. So I am going to advance the slide now. So you're going to lose it. Sorry. And we're going to move on to working with your value. So we're going to articulate your value within the context of this framework that Claudia talked a little bit about. So before I tell you all about this framework and show it to you, I want to start off by saying, why should you even bother considering to use this framework that we're talking about? How is it going to help you articulate your core values in the first place? So Claudia and I were at Georgia Southern University when we developed this. And one of the things that Southern was dealing with at that time was a consolidation. There was a lot of confusion around tenure and promotion. How do we talk about our teaching when teaching is so different across these campuses? We don't have a lot in common yet because the consolidation has just happened. So that was sort of what was framing it. But then it became this bigger thing that we realized as we were working on this project. Faculty elsewhere were having the same questions, maybe not because of consolidation, maybe just because that's where we are in our moment in time in teaching. How do we talk about our teaching? How do we articulate a core value around teaching? So as we developed this framework, we realized it was going to be helpful to people beyond just our institutional context because it helps you identify evidence of teaching behaviors. So that's the first thing it does. It helps you identify specific evidence that represent the core value you just wrote down. So if you think about a teaching philosophy statement, which most of us have written, you might not think of it as a core value statement, but you typically have some sort of thesis that says who you are and why you teach the way you do. Really, this framework is a way of helping you connect this is who I am as a teacher with the very concrete evidence that shows how that, I mean, it's one thing to say, oh, I'm an inclusive teacher, but if you don't show evidence that you're an inclusive teacher, it's kind of a meaningless thesis statement. So what this framework does is it helps you connect that core value of I'm an inclusive teacher with, and here's the evidence, here's what I do as a result of that. So it's going to help you make those connections and determine potential sources of evidence that align with this value. So we did collect a number of responses from you, and it looks like, oh, wow, a good 40 people who responded are using, it looks like everybody who responded actually is using student evals, end of term evals for their portfolios or whatever materials. But only 11 people are using a teaching portfolio, and only 10 are maybe using Scholarship of Teaching and Learning or lesson plans. So part of what this framework does is it helps you identify potential sources of evidence beyond what you've thought about before. So the analogy I like to use is that teaching is kind of like an iceberg. And oftentimes when you have someone come in to observe your class, or even when you talk about your own teaching or students give feedback on your teaching, and the iceberg, you only see the tip, right? But most of the iceberg is underneath the water and you don't see it. And teaching is similar. A lot of what goes into really good teaching happens below the surface. It's not immediately visible. And one of the things we found working with instructors is that instructors are struggling to talk about what they're doing beyond what's immediately visible. So that is another thing that this framework helps you do, is get beyond that tip of the iceberg. And so finally, this framework can help you develop a coherent, focused narrative that aligns your behaviors with evidence of your value. So that's really what we're doing. There are 3 things that this can help you with. Now that we know a little bit about what it can do and why you might want to use it, I want to introduce you to the framework. And we're going to do that by doing a matching activity. So you have 2 minutes to do this, and I've started the timer. If you're struggling to get this to work, you can't see all the definitions, what you'll need to do is click on the little blue icon in the bottom right-hand corner of a tile, and that will expand it so you can read the full definition. And then if you click the X in the upper right-hand corner, that's going to close the enlarged definition so you can go back to the main screen again. To match the tiles, you just click on a tile and you click on the tile you think it matches with.
And you can see that there are basically 6 big categories that are part of the critical teaching behaviors, and then 6 definitions to go with them.
It's really fun to watch your faces as you do this, for those of you who have your cameras on, because you're like, oh, it's a game. I got to figure out how to do this right. Ooh, we got someone who finished 6 out of 6 in 6 tries. I'm going to have to look to see who that was later. You get a prize. Just kidding, I can't find you. But get a round of applause from me for whatever that's worth. All right, 20 seconds left. Oh, since I can't do anything to award her other than say it out loud, Valerie DM'd me and said that it was her. So congrats, Valerie. It looks like there are about 3 or maybe 4 who got 6 out of 6 in 6 tries. So congratulations to you. Since this is kind of a game, I'm guessing you'd like to know what the answers are. So you should be able to see what the pairs are. We're going to work more with these categories and their definitions in just a moment, but I really hate it when people don't show me the answers after they've put me through this. I'm like, come on, I did the work. Show me what it is. And Tanisha Osborne is also saying that she got 6 out of 6. But Tanisha had a leg up because Tanisha was at Southern, and I think she's seen a version of this presentation before. So hopefully you can see the pairs. Claudia says you can't. Okay, no, I don't. I think I might have to. All right, that's okay. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take you to the next page where I show you the PDF that has all the answers on it. So this is the PDF of the entire framework that we built. You can go ahead and download that. I recommend that you keep this open somewhere on your desktop because we're going to be using this throughout the session. But you can take a look at those definitions and see maybe what you got wrong. It looks like everyone eventually got them right. But you'll notice that there are 3, what do we call these? I'm not so good with Excel, folks. So columns, that's what you call them in Excel. There are 3 columns, and the first one is the category and their definitions. The second one is the instructor behaviors, and these are just sort of broader behaviors. We've tried to narrow it down so it's not so overwhelming looking. And then the final category is different types of data sources you might use as proof of these behaviors. So what's nice about this is some of them are going to overlap in terms of what can I use to document? Well, you can use student evals. In every single context. It depends on how you frame it. So if you're not seeing the PDF, because I see that someone's not, what you'll need to do is there's a blue bar at the bottom. You should just be able to click anywhere on the PDF viewer and it should open that for you in Nearpod. And if you're not in Nearpod, that could be why you're not seeing this because you're not seeing
I have to say, I'm in Nearpod and it is not working for me either, but I did post the link to the framework so you can open it. The link to the framework as posted on Google Drive is in the chat, so you can open it that way too.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. So what I'm going to do is allow you, if you can get it to work in Nearpod, that's great. If you can't, Claudia has posted the link. That's why we like to do things together, because there's always one of us to cover if something breaks, as it does with technology. Okay, Renata says it automatically downloaded for her. Yeah, so it won't open, it'll go to your downloads. So be sure to click your download. But I'm going to give you about 4 minutes now to silently look over this framework. Go ahead and read the definitions, the behaviors, and how you can document that. So I'm going to go into silent mode so I make sure I stop talking and let you think.
All right, so I think it's almost been 1 minute since Lauren gave you the warning, so I'm going to bring us back together. And I know there's a lot on this page, so if you haven't had a chance to look at all of it, you are able to come back to it. So either using the link that we shared, or if you download it to your computer, it's available to you, or as Lauren mentioned at the end, we'll share a folder with all of these files. So you'll come back, you have the chance to come back to it later. Just summing up a little bit. So as you looked through the framework that we shared with you, as Lauren mentioned, it really gives you an idea of some of the things that you can talk about to go beyond just the tip of the iceberg and to think about your teaching that may not be as readily visible. But also, hopefully, our goal is give you some ideas for things that you may want to explore that you're not currently doing, or just finding yourself in there, like, oh, I'm doing these things, I'm on the right track. So really, we are hoping this framework gives you a place to identify some of the guiding principles and research-based practices for what effective teaching can look like in the classroom. And as we designed that, it was really our desire to give you like a one-stop shop sounds weird, but a one-stop document maybe to help you identify big picture. Like these are some of the big picture things, like being inclusive is important being inclusive is important to me, or engaging my students is important to me. And then going into narrowing it down to, okay, what does that look like specifically in my classroom? And what are the types of evidence that I can select and identify and include in my narration to showcase that I am living up and fully living my values in the classroom. And so with that said, it is time for a poll, and Lauren has put that on the screen already. She's keeping me on time. Now that you have had a chance to look at the framework, hopefully you have been able to find your value in one of those categories. And so in this poll, we would like to ask you to select one of the categories that you think best represents the value that is most important for you in your teaching. That said, we know that some of the values that we have, or that some of the values that you have written down in the beginning, really probably fall into more than one of those categories of the critical teaching behaviors framework. But for right now, just select one. You don't have to limit yourself to one in your materials that you're creating, but for the purpose of this session, just select one of those categories. And so Lauren is opening the poll in Nearpod. So please pick one. And once you are done with that, I'm also going to give you a quick preview of what is coming next. So we are in our next activity going to spend some time in thinking about your teaching behaviors and what you are doing in the classroom already to give you a head start on your narrative of documenting effective teaching behaviors. And for that, we also want to give you an opportunity to talk to people who maybe have their values in the same category as you do. And so we are planning on creating breakout rooms for people who have the same interest. For those of you who do not want to be in breakout rooms and who prefer to just continue working individually and quietly, you have the option to do so too. But for those of you who are looking forward to maybe discussing some of your ideas with peers who are sharing the same value and brainstorm some ideas for behaviors and opportunities for documentation, we ask you that you go into your Zoom and rename yourself. And Lauren will bring up in just a moment the next slide.
Okay. So, you know, the minute you mention breakout rooms, people scatter like rats off a sinking ship. They're like, no, not a breakout room. So as Claudia said, if you don't want to go into a breakout room, don't. We will assign you to one because we have to, because that's the way Zoom works. But you don't have to go. If you prefer to work alone, we're okay with that. That's cool. So you're not going to hurt our feelings if you prefer to sit quietly and work. We do ask that you work on, you know, this because you've committed your time to being here. But I also, and you're probably going to check email, like you're going to do it. So, you know, just make sure that you're spending some of the time working on what we're talking about here. So it looks like everybody who wants to has submitted something to the poll. I wanted to, hopefully you are seeing the poll results just in case you're interested in seeing what that looks like. It seems like a lot of people, engage is a huge category, and it always is when we do these workshops. It's not surprising. And the second one is include, which is like way beyond engage. And so it kind of trickles down from there. And remember what Claudia said, your behavior doesn't exactly fall neatly into one category. For the purposes of writing a coherent narrative, it really is helpful to pick one, maybe two categories that you're going to be able to bring your teaching narrative and your behavioral evidence under. So I'll point that out. Okay. And as Claudia is working to set up the breakout rooms, I am going to repeat that if you want to be in a breakout room with folks who share your value, you should change your name to one of these acronyms, well, abbreviations, really. So if you put an AL in front of your name, we're going to assign you to the align room. And again, if you don't want to be in a breakout room, that's okay. We have to assign you to one because that's how Zoom works. Just don't go.
Yes, so please, if you are, just like Lauren said, please put the abbreviation in front of your name. And actually, if you do not put anything in front of your name, you're not going to be in a breakout room. So if you want to talk to somebody, put an abbreviation there. If not, I will assume that you prefer to work quietly. And so on your Nearpod slide, you have the abbreviations. And I will start putting
so folks are asking how they change their name. So if
what do we write? That is
where
no
do you
change your name, you would click on your name in the participants tab on the side. So open up participants, and then you should see your name actually at the top. And right there is a button that says more. And if you click on that, it gives you the option to rename. And then you can rename your name. Oh, you can rename yourself in that way. And I will mute myself now and start pairing, and then handing it over to Lauren.
You should do this in Zoom, Kelly. There are some people who are asking, so make sure that you're renaming yourself in Zoom because we're using Zoom breakout rooms for this, not Nearpod. Good question. Whenever you're using multiple technologies, it gets a little confusing. So Claudia is working on that, getting you into your breakout rooms. While she is setting that up, because there are a number of you here, we're going to talk about an activity that you should be doing silently. So right now, you should see a Google Doc on the Nearpod screen. And it should say documenting effective teaching behaviors, activity 1, personal reflection. So for this activity, you're going to start with just page 1. It says stop here. I really do mean it. Stop there. You cannot edit this, at least you should not be able to, unless you click on File in the upper left-hand corner and then click Make a Copy. If you click on File and Make a Copy, it should be owned by you, and it is then editable, and it will be accessible in your Google Drive folder later. So this is your copy. You will not use it.
Lauren, for me, when I do that, it says it's kind of grayed out, the make a copy.
Is it? Okay. So what I will do is I will
I can download it though.
You can download it? Okay. If you can download it, then I would recommend download it. Thank you for that, Denise. Where can you download? You should be able to go to File and then Download. And then you can download it. The first option is Microsoft Word, but if you prefer something else, if you don't download it as a PDF because you can't edit it that way. Laura says that there is no option on a Mac. So let me work on getting that link for those of you who are working in a Mac.
I don't see it on mine either, actually.
Okay. Let me get that.
Well,
for you.
I was gonna say, just to let folks know, mine was saying that there was too much traffic, and so some menu options were unavailable. And so if you just wait a minute and click try again, I just got it, so.
There is also, and that might not help you, since I put the link in chat, it might not help if there's just a lot of traffic. And some are saying that they refreshed their screen and other options showed up. If you want to use it in Google Drive, Rachel has pointed out that you probably need to be logged into your Google Drive. So if you're not logged in, you should be able to download it as a Word doc and it should work that way. Okay, so while Claudia is setting that up, go ahead and take some time, take about 3 minutes to write your responses to these questions. And for those of you who are not going into breakout rooms, you will continue working on this activity while others are in breakout rooms. So it seems like folks had some good conversations because they're still trickling back in. If you stuck around, hopefully we're able to further articulate your responses to these questions and these prompts, or at least get some quality email checking time in. We've got about 3 seconds before everyone is back with us and we get back to it. All right, so this is probably the part that you've all been waiting for. This is the part where we bring it all together, like Claudia said, and we figure out, how do we use this template? We've identified our core values. We've started to look at some evidence with the last set of questions. How do we bring all of that together? So that's what we're gonna do as we wrap up now. And I'm sorry we shortchanged you a little bit on the breakout rooms to make sure that we were able to get through this last bit of information. So I want to start off this section by going through some of the characteristics of an effective narrative. I'm not a big fan of lots of text on a screen, but I thought this was important enough that you be able to see all of it since we are in a virtual environment. So the first thing that you do in terms of creating an effective narrative is use your core value, where we started off today, to focus on 1 or 2 areas, which was the purpose of our last activity, that are going to create some coherence across your materials. All of the categories are important and all of them are components of what good teaching is. But if you're going to create an effective, persuasive narrative, trying to hit all of them is going to be really scattershot. And this might sound kind of like, what? Why wouldn't I try to cover all of them? Well, if you've written a teaching philosophy statement, hopefully your thesis is not, I care about every single aspect of teaching. It's super broad. You want a thesis statement that is narrow and focused and you can support with evidence. And that's really what we're saying in this first step. So the next step of this is to state your core teaching value and use it to drive the selection and framing of evidence. So if your core teaching value is engage, you need to be selecting evidence. So for me, maybe I would pick this Nearpod presentation and I would show folks, here are some slides and here's how I engage folks in a virtual presentation. I do these sorts of activities. I might pull screenshots. I might just write about it in a narrative to explain how that's engaging. So you want to provide those specific examples that allow your reader to see you in action. Remember, whoever's looking at your materials might not get to watch you teach. Even if they do get to watch you teach, it's only for a little bit of time, or maybe it's online. So the idea is that your narrative should be illustrating the way you teach, should allow me to see you as a teacher. Step number 4 is very important and often overlooked. I know when I created my first teaching portfolio, I did not do number 4. I selected artifacts, but I didn't explain how the reader should approach those artifacts. What sort of lens should they be reading them through? So the idea is that you should be annotating your artifacts, either using an annotate tool that allows you to put those virtual annotations in, or in some other way writing in the margins, or even just putting notes at the top of it that highlight specific behaviors and aspects of that artifact that are going to tell me, okay, so you gave me your syllabus. A syllabus can show a lot of things. How does your syllabus specifically show me that your core value is include? Well, I might point out that I'm using inclusive language, we, us, our. I have a diversity and inclusion statement. I have course ground rules. I leave room in my syllabus for students to co-create knowledge. Those are the things I might want to annotate if I'm providing my syllabus. Whereas if my core value is align, I'm going to be pointing out my learning outcomes or how my assessments align with those learning outcomes. I might even have an alignment chart, which I actually do in my syllabus, that shows how my assessments align with the course outcomes so that students can see we're doing this for a reason. It aligns with these course outcomes. So it's very important to not skip number 4 if you're creating an effective narrative. And finally, we want to make sure that you align your core values, your behaviors, and your evidence across all of these materials. To get you started, this is where we move on to page 2 of your handout. So some folks asked when they should do that. Page 2 gives you this narrative starter template, which I've got on the slide just for reference. But I want you to take a minute there. Hopefully this is summing up all of the things you've done in this workshop, between starting off with your core value, getting into your breakout rooms to discuss some of your ideas you jotted down. This is going to help you get into a more formal statement of what it is that you're doing. And Claudia has dropped the link to that Google Doc into the chat if you missed the earlier part of this session where we had shared that out. So if you're just joining us, that is in the chat, so you can join us to finish this activity. Just take a minute. I am going to ask you to post this on the next slide, so just FYI, have something you might want to copy paste ready.
And also, it's probably important to point out that this template is really a starting place. If you just use that, it would probably be not as effective as you would like it to be. But I think it's a good starting point just to get some words on the page. I think for me, that's often the thing that's most scary, to see the blank page and not know where to start.
Yeah, this template really does oversimplify the narrative process. You know, if we were trying to be comprehensive, we'd be here for another couple of hours. But as Claudia said, this is a place to start. And what's useful about this template is it's going to help you state your core value, identify what you've done as a result of that value, so your behaviors, and then it's going to help you select some specific evidence and explain why it demonstrates that value. So that's really the goal of this template. It shouldn't be your final product. Okay, for those of you who are ready, we have another Collaborate board, and this is an opportunity for you to share your completed template with us, if you would like to share that. This is a great opportunity for you to share your ideas and also to get inspiration from what others have written. Only one person is brave enough to share? Man, you're all profiting from this one person. Thanks, one person.
Problem is that the character limit. I'm 182 characters over.
Oh, it's okay. You can cut off the demonstrate the evidence part.
Or just post it in a separate thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I get it. Some of you need more time to think. That's okay. That's why it's anonymous, because I don't know if you posted it or not. Yeah, there we go. And I like that we're getting some good variety. We have some engage, align, include. And some of you who might be in the reflect category, you're like, I need more time to reflect on this. That's my core value, reflecting. But thank you for the one person who did do a reflect. Okay, so I'm going to move on because I don't want to leave you hanging with I don't want to leave you hanging without some next steps to follow after this. And to look at what Jessica has said in the chat, she says it's interesting how some of the same behaviors are being used in multiple values. And that's absolutely true. Behaviors can demonstrate different things, like I said about your syllabus. That's why those annotations are so important, because that's where you make the difference and show that it demonstrates your core value and not someone else's. It's all about that narrative.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the interesting thing also is, and I think that's also where the critical teaching behaviors can be really helpful, is you may focus in on one of the behaviors at some point, but then as you grow over the course of your career, that may shift, right? And you may still not your values may shift, or maybe not your values, but your behaviors may shift and become more diversified in supporting that value. And I think that is a great way, or at least that's one of the benefits that we see, is that one of the things is that as you collect evidence and annotate them, you can show that grows over time, and you can show, this is where I fell short in my first year, but over the course of my next 5 years, I've collected additional evidence, and here is how I've grown and made changes and improvement. And so as far as next steps are concerned, this is really what we hope that you will do, is that you will continue working on your teaching narratives. Hopefully this has given you a place to start and a framework to maybe conceptualize your value, your behaviors, and then put it all together with the evidence, yeah, not have the empty page scaring you. The next thing that we recommend is that you get feedback, and feedback, I think, is a super important part of the process, from colleagues, from the teaching center that you may have at your institution, from the people who are looking at your materials later on as part of promotion and tenure, and of course, or end of term evaluation, annual reports. So getting feedback is super helpful. But then also thinking about what evidence, in addition to maybe end of term student feedback, what additional evidence can you collect now, so that you have it for the next time you're putting together a portfolio documenting the evidence and the effectiveness of your teaching. And so with that said, teaching centers.
So I did want to put in a plug, since this is the USG Office of Faculty Development. We are faculty developers. You have faculty developers of your own. And if you click this link, you can find your university, and then you can go to their center page. So there are lots of folks at your university who can and are happy to help you with this. So that's my plug for them. But I also promised you that I would give you a folder of materials where you can access not only the framework, but also some of the other instruments we've built to align with this framework, which include an observation protocol. And I think Claudia's got a mid-semester student feedback that she's dropping in there as well. So if you are looking for something that aligns across instruments, not just in building your narrative, but also in getting observation feedback, as well as getting student feedback, this is your folder of materials. So go ahead and open that. That's a public folder. You will have to be signed into Google to be able to access that, but I'm going to advance the slides, so make sure that if you want this, you click the link. And Claudia, maybe if you could drop that in the chat too.
Yes, and we'll also share the link again in the follow-up materials from Denise, so you will have it.
So we're a little over time, so if you do have questions for us, this is where you can drop them. And we will respond to you. We're happy to talk more about this later on. If you don't have questions, don't worry about it. We're glad you were here with us. We appreciate you taking the time to be active in this webinar, and good luck with your narratives.
And thanks so much, Lauren and Claudia. This was great. I think it's so valuable to have measurements of our teaching effectiveness beyond student evaluations. And I think this has been really great. I'm putting in the chat a link to our webpage where you will find all archived documents and links to our next upcoming webinars. Thanks also for the plug for our Centers for Teaching and Learning. They are so valuable on our campuses, and I hope that you will reach out to your folks there because they're amazing resources for teaching and learning for faculty. So thanks everyone. Thanks to all of you for playing along.